Welcome back, everybody. Today I'll be sharing with you guys my 3-bucket worm composting system. I have been doing this for about a year and a half now, and I've had pretty good success, so I thought I would share how it works. Let's get started. First, we have the bottom bucket, 5-gallon bucket. You want to leave this completely how it is. This will collect any excess liquid that drains from the second bucket. The second bucket, still a 5-gallon bucket, but I have drilled holes on the bottom for drainage and along the side for ventilation and airflow. And in this second bucket is where I have my worm bedding, my worms, and my food scraps. And over the course of 3 to 6 months, with consistent feeding, the right environment, your worms will slowly eat away at the food scraps, and then poop, and then create this beautiful worm castings. Black gold, which your plants will love. It's pretty awesome what they do. So that's what the second bucket is. Now once your worm castings are ready to harvest, you want to stop feeding your worms, okay? Grab the third bucket. The third bucket will be exactly the same as the second bucket. Holes around the side, holes on the bottom. And then you'll put the third bucket on top of the second bucket, and in the third bucket you'll have your worm bedding and fresh food scraps, and the worms will slowly migrate up looking for food. And then once they've all migrated up to the third bucket, then you harvest your worm castings, and then you start the process all over again. So pretty awesome and pretty easy. So that's pretty cool. Now let's talk about the worm bedding. I have always used coconut coir for my worm bedding, but compost, manure, any type of soil will work just fine. You can also throw in some like shredded cardboard, dried grass, dried leaves, just anything brown that will make a cozy home for the worms, okay? And your worms will actually eat some of the worm bedding as well. So worm bedding is all in. Then I put the worms in. Worms, make sure they're red wigglers. These are your go-to worms for composting. They can eat half their body weight in one day. So pretty awesome. So worms and bedding are in. Now you feed your worms. What do worms like to eat? Vegetable and fruit scraps. So I feed them a lot of banana peels, carrot and beet tops, peelings from cucumber, carrots, so whatever food scraps I have lying around. And if they're like bigger scraps, I try to roughly chop them up so they're a bit smaller for the worms to eat. And I usually feed my worms 2 to 3 times a week. Kind of just learn their schedule, and that's what they like. But it can vary depending on how much worms you have, how happy they are, and so on. Also, foods to avoid. You want to avoid meats, dairy, processed food, spicy food, high acidic fruits like lemons, limes, pineapple, just too strong for their body. Breads and pastas, some people say they're fine to give to worms, but I avoid them. I just give them real, fresh vegetable and fruit scraps. So once you get into the routine of feeding your worms couple times a week. You also want to check in on the moisture level of the worm bedding. And you want it to be moist, not sopping wet, not too dry. I typically gauge this by grabbing a handful of the bedding, squeezing it. If a few drops come out, then it's perfect. If more than a few drops or like a stream comes out, that typically means it's a bit too wet. Another way to know if it's too wet is if the bottom bucket is collecting like a pool of water. That should be a pretty major sign that you need to dry your bin out. Either put more browns in or stop feeding your worms like high water content fruits or vegetables. And yeah, I have never though had a problem with my bedding being too dry. It's always on the side of a bit too wet. So, but if it is too dry, sprinkle in some water to get it a bit more moist. And one thing I love about this system is it's small, it's compact, and I have kept this in my closet for the past year and a half. It does not smell at all, and it keeps the worms at the ideal temperature of like 60 to 80 degrees. And whenever I want to check on them, I can just open my closet door and there they are. So, but you can store this outside. You don't have to store it inside, but make sure if it gets below freezing, bring them in or they will die. And yeah, their prime temperature range is like I said, 60 to 80. Anything higher or lower, they just won't be as efficient. So yeah, so with that being said, I highly recommend starting a worm composting system. It's just amazing to watch these little worms slowly chew up this food and then poop, and then it just turns into this rich compost, worm casting. It's beautiful. So I highly recommend. Bye bye.